Hello, this is Lost and Raider. A few days ago I posted a video giving my impressions of the camera and the electronic image stabilization test I did with the camera, taking it on a mountain bike ride. And since then I was reminded of a few inconsistencies and errors I made in the video. I wanted to make a follow-up video to correct the record. So I did a little more research into the material, and I wanted to post a correction video. I strive to make a positive contribution to the community, and so I wanted to make sure I'm as accurate as possible. Okay, so item number one mainly, GoPro Hero 5 Black. I originally stated only supported electronic image stabilization up to 1080p. However, I have subsequently found out it supports it up to 2.7K. Also has a maximum frames per second of 60 frames a second. So as long as you're shooting in 2.7K and 60 frames a second and below, you're fine. It will use electronic image stabilization. Above that, you will not have that feature. Which goes to the next point, how electronic image stabilization works. I was close to the money when I explained it on the earlier video, but I wanted to elaborate further after doing some more reading up on the subject. I admit that I'm new to the EIS technology, so I just wanted to clarify more of what I researched. Okay, how electronic image stabilization works. So your camera, GoPro Hero 5 or whatever you're using with electronic image stabilization, it shoots a frame, a video. So it takes that frame and compares it to the previous frames to use software and algorithms to basically take the image of the current frame and compensate for any what it considers shake, and uses the panning and shifting to correct the shake so it makes the image appear like you're going smoother. So I'm riding down the trail, I hit a bump, camera shakes a little bit, it takes those frames, compares to the earlier frames, and pans and shifts those frames that it's currently filming to compensate for the shake to smooth out the image. That is why you cannot use the full 4K sensor that this camera has, because it needs the space outside of what you're filming in to do the panning and shifting to electronically give you the smooth image. So in a way I was close to the money when I said how electronic image stabilization works, but I want to kind of elaborate. So it pans and shifts the image. That's why you can't use full 4K to get image stabilization on this, because it's using that outside area of the sensor. I mean, it's using the outside of using the full sensor, but using what's outside of the resolution that you're filming at to do the panning and shifting. And I presume frames a second limitation is probably a limitation of the processor on the camera. I mean, obviously it's having to do all this at runtime, so it's going to keep your processor pretty busy. So I would imagine the frames a second is basically a limit on the processor versus the actual EIS itself. I mean, that's just my guess. Mind you, it's a guess. So that's in a nutshell how electronic image stabilization works. Optical image stabilization is more hardware based. It's using gyro motion sensors on the sensor to detect shake, and basically it moves the sensor in whatever direction it needs to go to keep the image path straight. So it's using hardware versus software, which is what electronic image stabilization works. The latest Sony action cameras employ optical image stabilization. So it is used in the action cam market, not widely, but it is used mainly by Sony. That is the only one I know that uses it. I mean, I'm sure there may be others, but from what I know, Sony does use it in their latest action cameras. GoPro and Garmin use electronic image stabilization in theirs. And one thing that would be kind of curious is, could a hybrid image stabilization action camera be feasible? Could you employ optical and electronic image stabilization? It could. It's kind of a hybrid idea. Maybe could you employ both technologies and and even improve the quality even better. Because both technologies have advantages. OIS allows you to use the full sensor. So if I had optical image stabilization on this, I could film in 4K at any frames a second, because the hardware is straightening out the image, and there's no limit on, you're not relying on the processor or the software on the camera to do the stabilization for you. So you can use the full capabilities of the camera. Whereas electronic image stabilization, you're limited to a maximum resolution. You can't use the full sensor of the camera. And so electronic image stabilization kind of helps a lot with the advanced, because like optical image stabilization only works up to, you get into a lot of rocky terrain. I mean, there's, you'll still get shake with optical image stabilization. There's no data stabilization on the camera itself that's perfect. I mean, if you're really, 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 really concerned about a lot of extra shakiness, then a gimbal would probably be for you. A gimbal is obviously you have to do some research, but a gimbal is a hardware device that it allows, handheld. You can even, some that you can put on your chest. A lot of drones will have gimbals on the bottom to help keep this camera smooth while it's flying. So those really help with stabilization as well. But that's outside the scope of the video. So I'm not going to discuss gimbals. I'm just talking about optical image stabilization versus electronic image stabilization. So, anyways, I just wanted to clarify that and hope this helps. All right, awesome out.